Afternoon, everybody. I'm Shane. I'm the head of UX, head of experience design is the formal title at Jade. Some of you may know Jade is kind of in two halves loosely around Jade, the language in the database, and a consultancy. So I'm sort of mostly in the consultancy side, but we're branching on and off. And some of you, as we heard this morning, are already talking to Logan and Gray and other people around what I would call UXy things. I have the dubious honour today of being the last person between, oops, wrong button, you and this. It's always hard, the last one. You've heard a lot of stuff, you've paid attention all the way through, but it is the end of the day and I'm not going to try and stay in your way. What I am going to talk about is also not technical, so it'll be a bit of a change of pace as well. And as the agenda says, I'm going to talk about UI and UX and why it is important. And just to keep you on your toes, I'm going to effectively ask you questions for the entire time. Okay, I'm going to do some talking, but questions, so you're going to have to find something I don't ask in the middle of that. So I thought it would actually be worthwhile starting with what those terms actually mean. So, votes. Hands up, who wants to take a punt? The last one was what somebody yelled out last time I talked about this. Come on, somebody's got to be brave. B, the way the user interacts with the product. That's what UI design is. Any other punts? C? C, the product, all of them? Whoever said all of them? It's all of them, okay? Including unnecessary evil. And I mean that as a UI, UX designer. And the two are different, they're not the same thing. I have to agree, it is a bit of a necessary evil. And Greg this morning talked a little bit about how it's changing. Okay, there may not be UIs, there will be an interface, there will be an experience, there will be a way that your tool, your product, your whatever connects to the person using it. It just won't be a form on a screen. So that's UI design, all of the above. UX design. Have another brave person. C? C or D? C or D? A way of making a better UI and focusing on what's not in or on or in the product. These are not what I would call hard questions, but they obviously are. All of them? Same as last time, all of them? A? So we are getting to all of them. We're definitely getting to all of them. A. It's none of them. I would call UX design none of those things. I ran this past a few UI designers, I ran this past a few UX designers, and yeah, a few fisticuffs, and we agreed. So there's a lot of different definitions. It is semantics to a lot of reasons, but the best way I've ever found to show and communicate the difference between the two is the next two slides. Apologies to the woman in the room. This is a design. This is a user interface design. Can everybody see that? Can you figure out what it is? It's a urinal, yeah? That's a great design. Look, there's dimensions, there's things all over it. You can give that to somebody, and obviously with a bit more detail, and they'll build it. This is UX design. What can you see there? You're closest. Yeah. There's a tiny little thing in there. Okay, so it's just a little etched fly. in the bowl of the urinal. Okay, this reduces, let's call it cleaning costs, by about 80%. Okay, that is user experience design. Okay, I don't know, has anybody ever actually seen one of these? There is a couple here. Yeah, you see them on and off. They're not too common on this side of the world. UI design. You need it. If you're going to build it, you need it. UX design. Taking a little bit of a different look at what you're doing, why you're doing it, what are you trying to achieve. Okay, so you can't have, you shouldn't, I won't say you can't, you shouldn't have one or the other. If you're just dreaming about flyers but you don't know how to actually build it, you're not going to get anywhere. If you just build it, maybe it'll work, but you might be missing something that's actually a little bit, takes you a little bit further along the path you want to go along. So one way this is often shown, because models, charts, diagrams, if you come up from the bottom looking at what people do, functional, reliable, usable, those are the things that a UI delivers. Okay, and if you come up in terms of business requirements and what we need to achieve and all that sort of stuff, then that's where you can see the dotted line. That's called the UX chasm often. Chasms. Coming down from the top, which is quite hard, it's quite foreign. Meaningful, pleasurable, convenient, so that you need to meet. And depending on your context, depending on what you're trying to achieve, you can come all the way up from the bottom, you can start at the top and come down. Often you're doing both at the same time, but it's very difficult to cross that barrier. You'll see why when I start talking about exactly what is involved when you're doing, call it a major UX piece or a full-blown cycle of it. Another question. Go on, somebody yell out. B? False? C? I couldn't resist putting C and I needed a C. B? Yeah, it's false. It's not about software. To a degree, it's not even about a user interface. So I talked to Greg after his discussion, and he, in a traditional sense of forms, he doesn't have a user interface with what he deals with, but he does have a user experience. So all of the software, everything that's going on with him is all about faces and emotional responses. There's still a UX problem there. There's still a UX challenge there. There's still stuff around everything that relates, but it's not about software. This is a traditional diagram. This is the formal UX diagram. So the grey circle here is user experience design, as is traditionally kind of labelled. In the last year or two, it's actually just, it's lost the user and it's just being called experience design. There's things called customer experience, service design, blah, 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 blah. This yellow circle is interaction design, which is the new label for a UI designer. So things change, but they always stay the same. You can see a lot of other fields in there, crossing over from film, from psychology, from architecture, from building, from computer science. There's a lot of stuff that crosses into it, but we don't aim to own any of those spaces, we aim to connect them. That's really what UX is about. It's connecting all of these disparate things together. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. And use them to move everything forward. Okay, not just one little piece. We don't want a good UI that doesn't meet the need that the business has. We don't want a UI that's great for a user and they love it, but the business can't make any money. We don't want something, a building built that is awesome to look at, but it has no doors. This kind of thing happens. So another one. When did the term first turn up? When did you start hearing? hearing it? See? 93? Textbook? In a textbook. Anybody else? John? 84. 1984. George Orwell. Close, yeah. The correct answer is, again, none of them. Nobody knows. There's a few people that argue about it, saying I coined it. There's a few other people that say, no, you didn't, I did. The kind of accepted fathers in the field are Don Norman and Jacob Nielsen. The Nielsen-Norman group does a lot of work in the space. They're probably the closest. If you want a good book to read, Don Norman, The Design of Everyday Things. Got nothing to do with software, although he references some really old UIs in there from the mid-90s. That book doesn't actually use the term at all, but it's got a lot of the stuff in there that we would credit as being part of this as a discipline. Saying that, that's essentially the history of UX. So when I say we join a lot of things together, one of the biggest fields that we draw a lot of stuff from is behavioural science or behavioural psychology. All of this stuff is about people. It's not about technology. It's not about software. It's not about UIs. It's people. Every single time. So succeed or fail, it's people. Every time. If you're thinking about it just from a UI perspective, then why does a person push that button? Google tested 200 shades of blue. Which one is the best that people are most likely to click on for a link in a search result? Okay, they did that, and there was a result. There was a clear winner, and that's the shade you see. They were able to do that because scale. They had enough of a sample to draw from that they could actually pull a conclusion out of that. That's not a norm, but there's a lot of psychological behaviours, a lot of triggers and things that we all have built in. And a lot of the design aspect, a lot of the UI work leverages a lot of that. People feel more positive about people that are looking to the left. So if you see a marketing site and then it's got a big banner with a person, they'll be looking to the left. Okay? If whoever did it knows the stuff. Another area that we draw from, actually, I was skipping slightly ahead. This is a classic example and a really simple picture of the two things that matter when you're dealing with somebody doing something. If you want to change something, if you want to make somebody do something, these are the two things: motivation and friction. Motivation is how strongly they want to do it. Friction is how hard is it to do. Okay, so to get them from one side to the other, you either need to increase their motivation or you need to lower the friction for how hard it is to do. So if you want to give up chocolate, but you have chocolate stashed all over the house, okay, that's a lot of friction. You've got a lot of self-control, don't eat that chocolate. You take that chocolate away and it's really hard to get the chocolate, then friction, it makes it easier to give it up. So you use different tools, you use different approaches. If you've identified a problem as being more about motivation, then you're looking for different things within people. You're looking for different design approaches. Same with friction. That's it. Everything else that happens in your head automatically without you realizing falls into those two buckets. Who's seen this? No actual question slide, but only one person. 3 or 4? Okay. So this is often called the design thinking honeycomb. So this is out of IDEO in Stanford, the D School. It's essentially again, it actually draws a lot from behavioural psych and the way people interact with phases, ideas, different tools that you use in different places within it. So empathize is basically research. It's about learning about the people that you're dealing with inside a business, outside a business. Define is starting to pull that together. Ideate is looking for solutions. Prototype, building something, showing it to people, working with them, watching them use it. Test is that cycle, sorry. Prototype is actually building it. This is the other major area which has been drawn into UX. So if you've gone to an office and had post-its up all over the wall and had a guy standing at the front like me telling you go and do this, go and do that, chances are a lot of the tools and a lot of approaches that have been used have come from design thinking. So that's a way of bringing people together, and as I said earlier, you've got the UX chart with all these different fields, getting those people to talk, getting them to put all their stuff in a way that it can be seen. So my office at work is a fairly large room, 3 or 4 meters long and probably a couple of meters wide. Every wall is just covered, post-its drawn all over. It's whiteboard, floor to ceiling. It looks like a workshop. And this is one of the common tools that we bring through. So this is the process laid out. I mentioned Nielsen Norman, that's the nngroup.com. This is just their version of this. This is not specific IP, but learn about people, define what you're doing. It's not new, yeah. I'm sure if you're thinking about developing a new feature, then you're going to run through some sort of cycle like this. What we do as UX designers or experience designers is we bring a whole raft of tools and knowledge around the best ways to do this. We bring that to the table, and we don't answer the question for you. So if I was going to do this at your company, then one of the first things I say when I'm doing this work is, I'm not going to answer your questions. You are going to answer your questions. Do not look to me for solutions. Okay? I will drive you forward. I will make it happen, but you need to come up with the ideas, and we will rub them all together to create enough friction to start the fire that'll bring up the solutions. Another chart. This is effectively going from the bottom left to the top right, saying empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, design thinking. Yeah, so that moves you from this really amorphous, what the hell are we trying to do, where are we going, this kind of state, through to get a little bit more clarity. And then there's a thing called lean design, lean UX, lean agile. For a while, lean was the buzzword. Some of you might have come through it. There's another thing in the middle, design sprints, when you'll see it's smaller, it's tighter. I'm going to talk a little bit about that specifically. And then you've got a standard sort of agile process running. So this is all about just moving it through. The reason I like this diagram is that it separates out into kind of stages, and at different stages you're going to use different ways of working. So agile is something that some of you are familiar with. Maybe who has some flavour of agile? Yeah. So yeah, I say some flavour because yeah, we see a lot of flavours. And the chocolate's a favourite apparently. But at each stage in that process, we're using different tools, different ways of approaching. But the goal is always to get out that other end, is to produce that thing. Yeah, that's where we're all going. This is reality. That's what it's like. It's not any of the other stuff. That is exactly what it's like. And all of you are laughing because you know that's what it's like. Every part of the process is the same. It's nothing there. What does it actually look like? It looks like this. They got my good side. This is, oh yeah, I win the prize for the most photos in the entire day. I don't know if you noticed, I was there. This is the 4th time I'm in a photo today, so I'm going to go back to the office and tell I win. Standing up in front of people, facilitating, talking. But the key thing is that everybody else is doing the work. So this is actually figuring out post-earthquake in Christchurch how a school will run, how a new school was going to be built. And the students, the teachers, learning educators, consultants, people from the government, there's a whole raft of people there. And long story short, these guys all together figured out this is what the school will look like, this is how it will work, this is how the timetable will work. They cut out bells and alarms. For those of you with kids, they took the modern learning environment, they kind of modified it to fit, because there was a whole lot of Pacific and Māori influences coming into that particular school. But we brought that all together and we did it all on post-its on a wall. I mentioned ways that people think. Those are psychological mechanisms. Those are called mental note cards. Chunking you might have heard of. How many things can you hold in your short-term memory? Between 4 and 7. They're reminders of ways that we should be using. Those ones are up there for that design because they were relevant. Chunking is a myth, by the way, but anyway. And this leads on to things like wireframes and sketches, and leading on to actual wireframes. So the design at a low fidelity, this is what we think we should do. So the reason we do it that way, we do it with paper, we do it with pens, is it's accessible. Everybody can get in on the game. Kids, they're a pain to facilitate, but fun. Everybody can pick up a pen and draw and put their ideas down. They can write, they can draw a stick figure, they can do all that stuff. Okay, we can get it all in and out. It's fast. It's really fast. So we can get through concepts in a week that if we're actually doing at this level of fidelity or digitally, most people can't engage, and it will take weeks and weeks and weeks. So we work as low fidelity as possible and only move up into the more detail when we have to, not before. Another cycle of that, which is at the end of that whole thing around test, is testing. And this is critical. Sometimes the real world intervenes. You can't do the upfront empathy stuff, the research effectively, learn what's going on. So you do testing, and this is what testing's like. It's important. Like, nobody here, I hope, I really hope, would push a piece of software out without testing. No testing whatsoever. I mean, you have not run the code once. You've written it and released it. Yep. So, for most of you, you'll write some code, you'll hit build, and you'll run it up, and you'll see if what you've just written does something. And you'll be doing that 20, 30, 50 times a day. And once you're happy that it's kind of what it is, you commit it, maybe it runs through a continuous integration server, runs through some unit tests, maybe runs through some integration tests. Then there might be a person at the end who's actually doing some testing against some gherkin or business rule stuff, whatever. So you've gone through that whole cycle. I would say 80%, probably 80% of people that I've engaged with over my career have pushed back on doing a single user test. Okay? So you've got a design that is critical. It's what the user sees. It does everything for them. They never see the code. That's immaterial to them. But you don't test it before you put it out there. So to me, that's kind of nuts. But it happens all the time. And you see the effect of it all the time. So on that, none of them. You were waiting for the next slide straight away. How many? C, B, C. As many as you can get. Got a B and a C. Have I scarred you too much by having all of them? I do ask my mum occasionally. She has a good test. Do we have a consensus at all on this one? There's really a whole lot of kind of, oh. You say none of them, right? Okay, we've got a none of them. Show of hands. A? B? Tie. Yes. C? D? Logan. Close to your mum, are you? Yeah. It's. So that would be A? Or a minimum number of 30 is statistical significance. So, not A?
Well, if you've got 10,000 lines of code doing 400 different things, then it might take 20 users to run through it all, or it's 10 lines of code, the first user one. I'll do everything.
Fair call.
So it
Yep.
depends on the complexity.
Complexity of what you've done. Yep. The answer is 5. Okay. And 5, I won't say irregardless of complexity, but in practical terms, irregardless of complexity. So if you can get somebody to go through the thing that you need to do in an hour, say, so you've got an end-to-end, I don't know, creating a purchase order within a system, and the whole process takes an hour. If you can do that with 5 people, you will uncover about 80% of all of the problems in that flow. That's all it takes. No more. If you keep going, and sometimes I get asked to do this, if you do 10, you're wasting your time and money. Okay? That graph kind of shows, I'm sure everybody here can read a graph. Bang for buck. Okay? If you have a budget for 10 tests, then doing 2 rounds of 5 is far, far better. And in between, you fix the problems you find. So you do 5 tests, fix up what you see, and then do it again. If you do 10, you will just hear repeats. If you do 5 and then fix it, the next 80% will surface because people will not be distracted by the first set. So go for it. I'm assuming one test user goes through the flow that you're interested in looking at. Whether it takes 2 minutes or an hour, they just need to go through it. So in terms of moving fast and failing often, then this is how to do it. This is not statistical. Okay? Sorry? This is research on researching. So this is actually based on the Norman Nielsen group. They did the original research on this. They looked at systems that they created with flaws and looked at how they were testing and what people were discovering. And then they took those and said to people, this is what you should do. And then started letting people with real-world systems, including Windows 95 at the time, start to see that. And this is the pattern they saw. This is a, what do you call it? Perfectly drawn graph. You know, if you see the real data points, then it's all spread around, but it follows the curve through.
So presumably your second set of 5 will have a similar
Yep.
curve.
But you'll see 5 different things.
But first
Where's your first ones? Yeah. So I have no idea how many user tests I've done in my career. Thousands maybe, certainly 500 or more. You know, pretty much always in groups of 5. Seen this again and again and again and again. Occasionally somebody will say to me, look, we have to convince the board. They want to see at least 20 tests because that makes them feel good. So we'll do 20 tests. We see this. Occasionally, once, I've been doing this kind of work for 12, 15 years. Once we got a gem at like test number 13 or 14 out of, I think it was 20. Something just was like, oh, whoa. If we'd done 2 rounds of 5, we might have found it. I don't know. But that's the one time where doing more than 5 has had a really solid benefit. So it's called the rule of 5. 5 users.
As opposed to 5 times through the test.
5 users, 5 different people. Yep. So it's also interesting, the second time round, if you use 5 people, again, the same 5 people, you get a different set of feedback, you see different things, than if you use a different set of 5 people. So they've already seen it, this is not. So depending on the context and the problem, it's worth kind of mixing and matching. So there's kind of variations and things you can do around there. Yeah, but this is what I do pretty much as often as I can, because it's very fast. You can do this in a day. Okay? If you can get the people in, which can be a problem, then you can run through this in a day. You've done a sprint. You've done a whole lot of work. Is it right? 5 tests a day, job done. Okay, and you give a whole lot of feedback. When I say you can see stuff too, there is a skill to this kind of testing. It's not asking somebody, was that good? Or did you like that? Okay, it's observational. To use the kind of geek word, it's ethnographic observation. So there's a skill set around that. It's not hard, it's just practice, but it's certainly not asking people about things. It's observational stuff. It's easy for people to lie, and talking about behavioural triggers and things, people lie all the time, especially in a test setup. Okay, you can't rely on what somebody says to a direct question, unfortunately. It'd be a lot easier. This is what happens without testing. This is day one. Yep. That is day one with no user testing. Yep. See it again and again. And to be brutally honest, I always put the boot in. If I go through this, and I've been through this again and again, and this is what happens on day one in the release, and we've had the discussion, no, we don't need to do any user testing. Then this happens on day one, and I'll come back and say, it would have taken us a day. 1 day. We could have avoided all of the bad PR. We could have avoided all of the support requests. We could have avoided all of the annoyed customers. 1 day. So back to this. What I want to talk about is actually the middle cycle, experiment, test, learn is kind of a key area. It's where the bulk of the value comes out when we're digging in with enough detail to really be getting in. One way but it's that particular cycle, you can see it's slightly larger, is customized. We always customize that to people, to what they need, to what they've got available, to what they already know. We'll pick up whatever you've got and use that as input as well. So it's quite variable. So to make it easy, what I actually thought I'd talk about is a design sprint. So I asked about Agile. Who's heard of a design sprint? That's not from Jade. There's a few hands up there. Nobody. Jake Knapp? No? So Jake Knapp came from Google Ventures. He's out on his own now. They came up with this thing called a design sprint. Well, Jake did, but technically belongs to Google Ventures, but it's free. Go for it. They're a useful thing, and they're a little bit more structured than what we usually do. This is going to be a hard question. If nobody's heard of it. Who's up? C? We've got a C. I knew there would be a C.
None of the above.
None of the above? A? I wondered if anybody would have looked. Yeah, it's A approximately. Okay, there's always a bit of pre-work, there's always a bit of post-work. But A it is. Generally, we fit it into a week. So just to quickly run through the steps, because I know you've actually got the material there anyway, and happy to talk more about the details. Monday is all post-its on walls, people arguing, me throwing people out of the room, having a stern talking, bringing them back in to say sorry. Seriously, it happens. But it's key. Where are we going? What are we doing? Everybody needs to agree. So we use a whole lot of facilitation tools from design thinking to make that happen. Tuesday is more about bringing those into reality, saying, okay, this is where we're trying to go. How do we do that? Wednesday is effectively kind of playing them off against each other. So sometimes you bring in users at that point, just a couple of people. So it'll often give you a whole lot of insights that you didn't realize. Thursday, create something that works. So that could be smoke and mirrors, it could be paper, it could be anything that gets the idea in a form where you can show it to somebody. Friday is testing. 1 day. Remember, 1 day. So this has got a real value in business, because at the end of that day, you've got evidence from real people. You've got something to show and shop around. You've got a huge number of photos of post-its on walls, and I'm always surprised by how persuasive that is. But key, you've got a bunch of people from within the organisation that have been on a journey together, and they are usually 100% behind that idea at that point. Okay, it's a massive way of kind of cutting through the fluff and getting the ship aligned and going. And then you can take it forward. What's the next step? Depends on what it is, but you might do it a second time. You might take it into production. So, why is the UI and UX important? This is why. This is a rental car that I got last year. Which way do you turn the knob? After having it for a day and a half, 2 days, almost 2 days, I couldn't figure it out. I don't think the aircon was actually working because no matter which way I turned it, nothing much happened. But somebody thought about that and decided that was a good idea. They certainly didn't test it with 5 people. This is another example. Okay, it's an ATM machine. If you're just thinking about the user interface, if you're just doing user interface design, you wouldn't think about the person holding a shopping bag trying to use the UI, trying to plonk buttons. Somebody did go and watch people use an ATM out in the real world. So they might have redone the UI, but they also did that. So Japan, if you've ever been to Japan, Japan's great for this kind of little detail. It's all over the place. Got to remember context. Okay, got to remember context. Awesome design, you know, it's beautiful, it stands out, it'll look good on the shelves, people will buy it, but then they'll put it in the cupboard beside the other one. Okay, again, this is why somebody thought this was a good idea. Okay, this is real. I thought this was a joke. I'm not kidding, this is real. There was actually a whole joke thing that went through, maybe some of you saw it, about the absolutely stupidest way of putting a phone number in, maybe, I don't know, 6 months ago. But then they were all jokes. People just came up with all sorts of weird ways, roll a dice. Yeah, that's my phone number, I hope. Yeah, but this is real. This one is real. I'm sure there was driving reasons why, probably business reasons. But, yep. So, yeah. Another great one. I need to resize my phone. You just did not think about how somebody was going to be using it. It was not going to be on a desktop. So, yeah. Yeah. Somebody will. So you could do that. The idea that Clippy was ever a good idea was just something silly, but yeah. We are mostly past that kind of day, but yeah. So why is it important? Final question. I'll answer this one for you. It's how you differentiate. It really is. Thank you, Apple. Thank you, Google. But it's how people differentiate. It's how people make a decision between this thing and that thing. Which one feels better? Which one do I like? First impressions. It literally is. We are emotional creatures. We make decisions emotionally, and then we justify them rationally. That is how you make a decision. You wouldn't be human if you didn't. Another reason is that faster racehorses don't cut it. So that's Henry Ford. If I'd asked people what they wanted, I would have bred faster racehorses. Yeah, instead he built the car. If you just look at what you've got and keep going and don't start talking to people, especially the upfront research stuff for that one, then you're just going to keep doing a little bit better in the stuff you're doing now. But you're not going to change the world. You're not going to find that little thing, that fly in the bottom of the bowl. Okay, you're not going to see that. But most important, and this is key, it's not optional. That's why it's important. You cannot avoid it. So, best quote for that, asking whether experience design is necessary or affordable is completely beside the point. It's inevitable. You are going to have either a good experience or a bad experience. You cannot have no experience at all. If you're not paying attention to how people experience your product, then it's going to be a bad one. If you think about those cans that in the car, they weren't paying attention, they were just doing their thing. So why is it important? All of the above. And now I'm going to get out of the way of your beer. Thank you very much.